I believe fundamentally the best way to improve your body composition is a regular exercise regime, looking at your macronutrient intake, changing your calorie intake if it's too high.
Yep.
I don't believe a calorie is a calorie.
Okay.
I mean, it is insofar as it is a unit of measurement.
Sure. Yeah.
However, if you're giving 100 calories in a bar full of fiber versus 100 calories in dextrose tablets, your utilization of those calories is going to be very different in the body.
You will utilize them differently.
And by the way, fiber is huge.
Yep.
Fiber is fundamental, which is why you can eat loads of fruit and not see dramatic shifts in your blood glucose, and fructose is okay in fruit because of the fiber.
I mean, most people.
Most people.
So there's a brilliant study that came out, I think it's 2019, Zevi et al., it's in Cell, where they talked about personalized nutrition, and they did the glucose
Israeli
monitors.
group?
Yeah, they did the glucose monitors on the arm. If you can get one of them on, you should talk to them. They're interesting. And it's a really interesting study.
Link me?
So,
do you know them?
So yeah, I can.
Yeah.
But anyway, so cool. But yeah, no, it's super interesting. So they took a bunch of volunteers and they put them with these continuous glucose monitors so they could track blood glucose all the time. And they fed them set diets, and so then they monitored how their glucose spiked. And so for most people, you give them like a biscuit, a cookie, you get this spike in blood glucose, as you'd expect, right? You give them a banana, pretty flat, as you were just saying, fruit, fine. For a small number of people, the opposite pattern happens. So you give them a biscuit, a cookie, no blood glucose spike, give them a banana, boom. Right, so at a population level, the advice, eat bananas, not cookies, is excellent advice, right? But at the level of that individual, that's terrible advice. You're basically getting them to eat something that's continually spiking their blood glucose levels. So, and I think,
Is that microbiome at play?
So they argued a little bit. I argue possibly, I don't get that, to be honest, because most of the sugar is absorbed in the small intestine before it even gets to your colonic microbiota. So what's in your stool will not at all reflect what is utilizing sugar further up in your gut. So I have some dubious thoughts about that. But anyway, but you're right about calories not always a calorie, but I do think how the body responds is probably a bit more individualistic than has been considered in the field before, and it is an area that people are going into.
And the microbiome could be a determining.
So the microbiome and obesity, I mean, if I'm going to touch on that, I'm not saying microbiome has no effect on weight, right? It's clear if you have a microbiome that's better able to extract energy from your diet, you will get more. And the reason that happens is it breaks down the fiber into short chain fatty acids. You absorb them, you get energy from those acids. Now, some people's microbiota will be better than others at breaking down and releasing sugars. So acids, sorry. So there's definitely going to be some amount of variation in the amount of calories you extract from fiber, for example.
Yep.
But you're talking tens of calories, not hundreds of calories, right? And so over the course of your life, people say, yeah, but that tens of calories every day adds up and adds up and adds up and adds up. Your body will equilibrate, right? A larger body needs more calories to maintain it. So I can get how your microbiota might move you to a little bit and then you equilibrate. It's not going to continue and make you more weight, more weight, more weight, more weight. So no, I don't believe that the microbiota is leading to an obesity epidemic. It hasn't changed that much in 30, 40 years, whereas the levels of obesity has really rocketed.
Is that true though? Because the food industry, in some respects, has moved to a much more calorie dense, micronutrient light, fiber light composition.
Definitely
and I'm not, where I sit on this actually is more, our diet's changed, so our microbiota's changed.
Yeah.
And the microbiota, through mechanisms, and I'm getting a bit into woo-woo land here, but just let me
feel free,
indulge. I think there's so much you don't understand about the communication between the microbiome and the wider body, including the brain.
Yeah.
And my view is that, so it's a self-perpetuating cycle of, I'll call it badness. It's not a scientific term, but it's badness.
Yeah.
So the cycle is, in someone that's has a predisposition through genetics. And I believe that obesity is largely genetic, it's human.
Man, I agree with that. I got my DNA sequence, just to butt in briefly, I got my DNA sequenced when I was at the Sanger Institute as a sort of pre-test, and I got it back and it was like, you're bald, you're very pale, and you're probably overweight.
Is that what it said?
Yeah, I did tell it that, right? So that
is that what it said?
That's what it said, yeah. So, there is something in that. People will eat more depending on their genetics.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So when we were asked about what does Alan look like, I would have said, just look at his genome sequence. And that'll tell you exactly what you need to know.
Nailed me right down to it, like red hair.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I told them nothing about me, obviously.
That's fascinating.
So part of it is in your genes.
Definitely.
But can
I just go back to the badness?
Please, finish your point.
The badness and the self-perpetuating cycle. So someone has the predisposition. Now, if that person was in a jungle and all they had to eat was fiber and vegetables and lean proteins, I'm not sure that they would be as obese as they
No,
were
you're
here.
100% right. Environment plus genetics interacts.
And the last element is, so yes, it's the calorie-dense foods, but this self-perpetuating cycle, just to wrap this up, is the microbiota changes in response to the input, which is these sort of sugary, maximally processed fiber-like foods.
Yeah.
Therefore, you may get these blooms in, for example, the Proteobacteria, Enterobacteriaceae, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And through mechanisms that I hope you or someone in the realm of research determines, they communicate with the brain and they say, we need some more of that.
Okay.
We need some more of that sugary stuff.
I think your brain already asks enough for that sugary stuff. I think that's your microbes on top.
But is it
tastes good.
It tastes good, but maybe there's something more there. Could there be something more there? So the small intestine goes, we just love this sugar bath. We need more. So we're going to produce these molecules.
So, I mean, besides, like I will say, I'm not a scientist that works on the biology of obesity, but I work in an institute that is, obviously. So you pick up some knowledge by osmosis. The body is a brilliant, fantastic feedback loop system. It detects when it's eating food. It releases all sorts of hormones that determine whether you want to eat again or not, right? There's certainly some evidence that some of the things the microbiota can make might cross-react with hormones, for example, like GABA, serotonin. So I get all these things, right? But again, whenever you try and do things like fecal transplants in obese people, they do not lose weight. They do things like insulin, things maybe happen. They know what this has been done multiple times. No one's losing weight on a fecal transplant.
I have also looked at this evidence extensively, and my issue with it, well, I have a few issues with it. One issue. I have many, many issues with fecal transplant studies in terms of, is what you're giving to each of the patients the same? Is the study properly designed, so on and so on. It's very hard to make the case for FMT in this particular indication that FMT alone, without controlling all the other factors like diet, for example, is going to have an impact. But
it's a minuscule,
Yeah, so, but you're right. So this whole thing started with the case report. I think it was 7 years ago now.
Yep.
You know the story?
Yeah, I know the story, but please, probably your listeners don't. So,
Well, I'm sure we've talked about it before, but there was a case report, high impact journal case report. Essentially, a woman received a microbiome transplant. We call it a fecal microbiota transplantation or an intestinal microbiota transfer, to use the updated nomenclature, from a relative who was overweight. And this case report described rapid onset weight gain.
Yeah, sure.
So everyone then said, okay, microbiome's caused this, but then there's been randomized control trials since, there's been retrospective analysis of stool bank studies, and there hasn't been any impact.
So again, I cannot get across to people who may not be scientists, general public, that case reports are the lowest form of evidence, right? It goes back to, I can take a crystal from a crystal shop, rub it on my rash and my skin, my rash went away, the crystal did it, right? Like, there's no evidence for that.
It might have done
it. It might have done it, but then, but it didn't, right? So that person may have gained weight anyway. There's no proof that came directly from the transplant that they got. So case reports are interesting, and they might send you down a path of inquiry. But on their own, they are worthless almost. Again, I think we talk about this, maybe just briefly detour into the scientific method. The scientific method is beautiful, right? It's science gets a lot of bad press, and scientists are terrible people, blah, blah, blah. Scientists are human beings, they make mistakes, right?
But that's
a very small proportion are fraudulent, right? But the scientific method is brilliant because mistakes get corrected, right? And so a case report is a case report. Does it repeat? Do other people independently find the same thing? If the answer is no, then that's a weird oddity that who knows what happened, right? It's the crystal on the rash, right? It's nothing. And so the scientific process is a beautiful thing. The problem is it's really slow, right? It takes years and years, decades and decades.
Can I just ask you a question? Are you into crystals?
No.
It was just a random thing.
I see crystal shops in my local high street. They really annoy me. But anyway, that's
I didn't have you down as a crystal guy, but I just
quite the opposite. Yeah.